What the fuck? Fear. It's an instinctual emotion. It served as a survival mechanism for early humans. It alerted them to potential dangers and allowed them to take action to avoid harm. This helped our ancestors avoid predators, natural hazards, and other threats to their survival, increasing the likelihood that they would live long enough to pass their genes on to the next generation. Thus, over time, this evolutionary pressure molded the human brain to develop a quick and rapid response to fear. This explains why we're afraid of snakes, or heights, or even a bad registration portal. But why can one experience fear when they see this, or this? It's quite obvious what the threat is when you see a snake or a spider, but what's the threat with these images? The Uncanny Valley is a hypothesis in robotics and computer animation that suggests, as a robot or animated character becomes more human-like in appearance and motion, the emotional response of a viewer becomes increasingly positive. However, as the character crosses a threshold and becomes almost, but not quite human, the emotional response becomes strongly negative, creating a dip or valley in the emotional response curve. This phenomenon is known as the Uncanny Valley.
Now that we have a basis of what exactly the Uncanny Valley is, it's important to know the psychology behind the concept. Over 40 years ago, Masahiro Mori, a robotics professor at the Tokyo Institute of Technology, hypothesized that human reaction to a human-appearing android would shift from empathy to revulsion as the android came closer and closer, yet failing to obtain a perfect, lifelike appearance. But what exactly makes us humans feel so unsettled and eerie about human-like androids, dolls, aliens, and even the kids from the Polar Express? Many researchers have linked the Uncanny Valley to what is known as the terror management theory and Mortalian's salience hypothesis. The terror theory hypothesis emphasizes the human tendency to mitigate the anxious thoughts and feelings of knowing that their own death is inevitable by suppression or rationalization of death-related thought. Many humans construct a false conception of reality in which life is painted with order, stability, and permanence. For instance, this is commonly seen and can be reflected in the form of religions, rituals, cultural practices, and more throughout the world. This is where the mortality salience hypothesis comes into play. It states humans will react far more favorably to information in support of their practices and beliefs, which allow them to mitigate fears of death, and in return will react unfavorably to information that challenges their beliefs. Uncanny apparatuses, such as human-like androids, challenge those fear-mitigating beliefs and elicit distal defenses, a mental defense mechanism occurring when the death-related thoughts are prevalent in the conscious mind, reminding humans both consciously and subconsciously of death. Many suggest this response is a form of evolutionary adaptation or response to life-threatening ailments, as observing something that is human-like but not exactly human can elicit the same reaction as witnessing something dead or dying. As for the uncanny, when an android that appears or behaves like a human yet can be shut down and degenerated in a matter of seconds can be linked and remind them of their own inevitability to die, eliciting distal defenses. This can be reflected in a 2005 experiment performed by Carl McDormand, in which 63 participants were exposed to both uncanny images of human-like androids along with images of regular humans. After exposure, a survey was given in which respondents generally had no comments regarding the non-uncanny images, but did respond to the uncanny android images, describing them as disturbing, weird, and frightening.
Before explaining how facial features induce the uncanny valley feeling, it is important to refer back to the graph here. As you can see, the line increases in affinity as human likeness increases. For instance, we would feel more positive emotion towards a robotic toy instead of an industrial robot that does not resemble any human qualities. However, when human likeness reaches a certain threshold, our affinity for that robotic object decreases dramatically. A contemporary study gave a possible reason for why this valley exists within the human psyche. It was found that two individual portions of the medial prefrontal cortex help produce the sensation. One part of the cortex acted as a signal that overemphasized the boundary between human and non-human stimuli. The other part of the cortex, known as the ventromedial prefrontal cortex, integrated this signal with a likability evaluation. These two parts of the medial prefrontal cortex gave stronger responses to more human-like agents, but then showed a dip in activity close to the human-non-human boundary. One of the most significant facial features that manifest the uncanny valley are the eyes. For instance, even slight deviations in eye movements for robots could increase uncertainty and subsequently cause feelings of discomfort in the viewer, even though every other facial feature appears human-like. An experiment by the University of Twente measured the different types of incongruence in the uncanny valley effect compared to the reactions to human skulls with ape characteristic eyes versus ape skulls with human characteristic eyes. The results determined that viewers experience more restlessness with the former. This can be explained by the idea that humans perceive the world around them through past experiences. And since we are most familiar with humans, we can more easily spot minute differences. Furthermore, it relates to the fundamental idea that unliving objects do not have the ability to feel emotion. However, when robots are manufactured to appear human, it leads people to subconsciously believe that they now possess that capacity. Studies have shown that robots that appear to have emotion were seen as more unnerving due to the idea that there's a conflict between what we know to be non-human and its closest to the human appearance. These perceptions are most profound with the eyes, since we rely on them to communicate emotional experience. Therefore, when they appear abnormal, we experience uncanniness. Additionally, the eyes in conjunction with the cheeks and the forehead can shape the robotic face's apparent emotional state. As stated previously, the ascription of emotions to robots can make them more uncanny, but when they lack emotional expressivity, it can cause us to be confused about their perceived emotions, which amplifies the uneasiness. Other facial features can cause the uncanny valley effect when they are warped, sometimes even more so than the eyes. For example, the nose and the mouth in an investigation by two Brazilian universities caused a comparative amount of total dwell time on the altered faces, with the nose actually having the most dwell time. However, the impact of the facial features on the uncanny valley can be tempered with the use of real versus artificial faces. When the robotic face appears less authentic or more animated, it decreases the sensitivity for abnormal characteristics. An experiment revealed that participants experience more dismay with real and familiar faces. In this case, the looks would have a greater impact. Consequently, the realism level and distortion of stimulus significantly interact with human likeness to affect its uncanniness. The most effective way that the feeling of uncanniness is stripped away from irregular facial features is dehumanization. When the robots appear to have no mind of their own and are not connected to any emotion, then they become less unnerving. In addition to this, making them look cute or cartoon-like rather than strictly human will have a similar effect. Ultimately, dehumanization prevents the dip in the graph because abnormal facial characteristics send it back to the previous crest.
Now let's shift over to analyzing sound. An experiment conducted by Dennis Jansen for his thesis attempted to categorize the audio range for the uncanny valley. In this test, he took a voice line from a human and modulated it to different levels of robotic sounding. Through the test, he found that the uncanny valley range existed between 60 and 80% humanness for the voice line. Through our research, we discovered that the most prominent in the audio valley was in fact the link between visual and audio components. When these perceptions contrast, it can result in a perceived dissociation between the voice and the person. Such a scenario is such when the realism of the voice and the face are not in alignment. It results in the character being perceived as odd or unnatural. Tin, Grimshaw, and Williams recommended in 2011 that the level of human likeness might be subtly modified so that the perceived style of the voice sound matches an aesthetic appearance of the character. Another disconnect relates to the emotional states of the characters in question. The face alone possesses 42 face muscles and can form quite a wide arrangement, and that each convey a unique set of emotions. Capturing this range is quite often difficult for both robots and realistic animation, so much so that mocap is quite prominent in the industry. Oftentimes, an emotional statement is combined with a differing facial expression that fails to convey the same emotional response. Let's take a look at an example.
I get the gun from the drawer in the bedroom, and I tell myself that if this is all that life has to offer me, then I can do without.
In this, we hear the sadness through her voice lines and what she's saying, but her face fails to convey that same emotion. She's smiling, and her face conveys a very different message to what she's saying. It feels insincere and weird. Continuing on this trend of disconnect is the difference between the expectations of what the voice should be based on visual appearance and vice versa, as the attributes on one sense affect the other. The more a voice fits the visuals of a character, the more natural it seems, even if the character in question is inherently unnatural, and more audiences identify that character by that sound. A series of experiments by Dr. Angela Tinswell showed that for monsters such as zombies, strange snarling or growling noises feel almost natural and right to audiences, but a monotone voice and emotionless on an otherwise normal human generate a high level of dissociation and unsettlement. Let's take a look at another example.
When you see me again, it won't be me.
In this clip of otherwise normal humans talking, the audio track is recorded in reverse and then set forward, and it really triggers that unease that is associated with the Uncanny Valley. One such disconnect is time desync, where the voices don't quite line up with what the mouth is saying. Humans can detect down to a 50 milliseconds early audio desync and 220 milliseconds late audio desync. It's a very small offset that can be detected by humans, and it's off the audio is weird. Human beings are quite emotive beings for sound, pitch, and monotone, which convey almost nothing about emotions, also tend to unsettle people. More factors that increase the uneasiness are inappropriate word pacing, wrong intonation, differing pitch, frequency, and amplitude.
Now that we're familiarized with the Uncanny Valley and the psychology behind it, let's take a look at some examples of it being applied in horror films and shows. The first example comes from the 2010 Really You episodes in R.L. Stine's The Haunting Hour. The episodes center around a girl named Lily and a life-size replica doll of herself dubbed Lily D, which is like a much larger, much more realistic American Girl doll. As traditional horror tropes might have led you to expect, Lily D becomes sentient, and she begins to sabotage Lily's relationship with her mother, aiming to replace her human counterpart as the family's daughter. Lily D has several features that land her pretty low on the Uncanny Valley, one being her eyes. Humans look to someone's eyes to get a sense of their emotional state and intent, yet Lily D's eyes, while still resembling Lily's, are devoid of those hints, which make her unpredictable and thus horrifying. Another contributing feature is her rigid hands and jerky movements, which do not align with human motor skill fluidity. This concurs with a popular depiction of the Uncanny Valley, which places prosthetic hands near the very bottom, well below the line of affinity. Lily D rounds out her case for the perfect uncanny villain by directly tapping into one of the theorized fears behind uncanny dolls and robots: being replaced. Having manipulated the mother into rejecting Lily as her daughter, Lily D takes on the human form of Lily, while Lily transforms into an inert doll. This fear of replacement is likely related to mortality salience, which is our awareness of our inevitable death. An example of the Uncanny Valley in action on the big screen comes from the 2022 film Megan, which focuses on an orphan girl named Katie
and the Model 3 generative android, or Megan for short, Katie's aunt employs to be her niece's companion. Megan has a doll-like appearance, but is artificially intelligent and designed to serve Katie as both a friend and a nanny. But some faulty programming leads to an inability for Megan to determine reasonable and ethical boundaries in her mission to protect Katie. Megan has several of the same key uncanny features as the lady, such as the inhuman eyes. Although most of Megan's face resembles a human's very closely, her eyes are disproportionately large and overtly piercing, lending to the notion that there is some evil calculating going on behind them. Throughout the movie, Megan heightens her uncanniness by splicing unnatural movements, such as minimal contortions of the face while speaking, rigid hand and arm movements, and running on all fours, with natural movements, such as emotional expressions and flowy contemporary dancing. This further blurs the line between the human and the inhuman, sinking Megan deeper into the uncanny valley and increasing our repulsion.
So, to summarize, the uncanny valley is a phenomenon where a decrease in affinity towards an entity occurs as it becomes more human-like, but fails to reach a perfect lifelike appearance. It is caused by two parts of the medial prefrontal cortex that emphasize the boundary between human and non-human stimuli and integrate this signal with the likability evaluation. This concept is linked to the terror management theory and the mortality salience hypothesis, which emphasize humans' tendencies to suppress or rationalize death-related thoughts, and to react favorably towards information that supports their beliefs and unfavorably towards information that challenges them. The uncanny valley can be seen not only in visual appearance, but in auditory appearance as well, where the human-like voice should match the aesthetic appearance of the character. The timing and emotional states also affect perception. The realism level and distortion of the stimulus also interact with human likeness to affect its uncanniness. As we live in a world that's becoming increasingly technologically advanced, an uncanny world becomes even more likely. With humanoid robots such as Hanson Robotics' Sophia and AI that could probably write a script better than I could, we're teetering on the edge of uncanniness. Considering we go to a tech school, the implementation of this knowledge on the uncanny valley can be used to make our future hopefully a little less creepy. Thank you.